Welcome back to Light Talk, where everyone can share their own unique spiritual, supernatural, and paranormal stories and the unique experiences you've had. If you have any stories you'd like to share, email me at lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons down below. We have an awesome guest for you today. Lots of stories for you, and I'm just going to kick right in. So, welcome to the show, and I'll have the mic over to you.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm much happier now that I'm home and with my podcast. So,
hmm
yeah, yeah. How are you today
I'm
or
doing
this
good.
evening? Are you in evening right now?
No, I'm in the Pacific time zone. I'm an hour earlier than you, so.
Okay, okay. Sounds good. All right. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how'd you get into your ETs and how did this stuff come about for you?
Well, I have a background as a statistics teacher. I have a PhD in sociology. So, sociologists, we study things called hidden events. And these are things that happen to people that they don't talk about very much because they're afraid of, how people are going to react, ostracism, social control.
Yeah, yeah, understand that.
So I got involved in these whole areas through something called remote viewing. I mean, I had finished my PhD at WSU in Pullman, Washington, and I was in Boulder just for a few weeks at the time, and I heard someone talking about remote viewing on the local community radio station. And part of me, I was like a lot of people. I wasn't set against the idea. I just didn't understand how the average person would have any psychic ability based on the kind of education that, we've all grown up with. So I went and took the course in Atlanta, and it turned out it really worked. You could draw pictures and describe targets, objects, people, places without knowing ahead of time what the target was. You wouldn't find out what the target contents were till you got your feedback. And So that really kind of opened the door to a lot of different topics, mainly because, Dana, at the time, the program had been declassified. It was a former government special access program, classified program. And even the guys that were in it didn't tell their wives what they were doing. A lot of them were going up to New York City a couple times a month to work with Ingo Swann, who was a natural psychic. And So the program was declassified in 95, and the US had started it because the Soviet Union had a psychic espionage unit. The Soviet Union called it psychotronics. And now the new name for it, I'm told recently, is psionics. They just shortened it from psychotronics to psionics. So it's kind of looking at this whole other inverse reality beyond our physical senses, where it does seem there's energy, information, things are going on. It's not something our Western society has really acknowledged. I think other societies are a little closer to understanding what this is. Russia, China, places like this. It's something they've always been interested in. And being involved in this area, there were a lot of people coming from the government, retired people who were curious about this RV stuff because they might have come across it in their time wherever they worked in the government. They might have heard about it and they were curious. So they were taking classes in it. And that introduced me to people who had UFO contact, who knew about the government's secret UFO programs, which we've heard about a lot more in the past couple of years since the New York Times article in 2017. That article in the New York Times by Leslie Kean et al.
Yeah.
Really, made us aware that there was evidence for this that the government knew about in various programs, crash retrievals, attempting to figure out how the materials worked. and that this was highly secret. So these sorts of people would gravitate to RV classes. Eventually, I set up my own place in Boulder to teach RV, and you still kept attracting the same sorts of people, people who had had ET contact, people who had been in worked as contractors with the intelligence agencies, and these people would all tell stories of sort of different phenomena than we're used to talking about in public. And that's really what got me, going into looking into this topic a little deeper, going to conferences, um, and meeting more people like this. And now, we can see it's like the people in the current presidential administration, whatever you think about the administration as a whole, there are some of them that have been talking about UFO openness, disclosure, Marco Rubio and others. I mean, it's anyone's guess what's going to happen. But it seems like the dice are being rolled on the table a lot more. That, this is a thing that could come out. I mean, we just had whatever JFK files existed, we had those brought to public just last week. And I know for a fact, having talked to so many people involved in these programs, this is a real subject. The people that are in it are sworn to this extreme level of secrecy, and they are not going to come forward until they have to come forward because they're afraid because of the NDAs they signed, non-disclosure agreements. They are afraid to uh, do something that might expose them to legal action from the federal government for violating their security oaths and their agreements never to talk about what they've worked on because the implications are so big. So that is sort of what one of my books is about. I called it Black Swan Ghosts. It's not about ghosts. You saw the poster up there behind me. It isn't about ghosts. It's about ghostly topics, things that we know to be real, but we don't talk about for fear of public ridicule and, retaliation. And in some case, these people, we've had some of them come forward recently, David Grush, Lou Elizondo, others who've told us this is real. We've seen the evidence, but we can't talk about it until we're in a secure facility because of our security agreement. So, Dana, what it suggests is there's a whole different reality next to us all the time. And many people experience this reality, whether it is ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot, something that my remote viewing students in Boulder used to talk about their sightings of Bigfoot and their encounters in the Rockies, not very far from you. I mean, I heard these encounters for years before it finally sunk into my mind how significant this was, because we're not trained to look at topics like this that are kind of marginal. I mean, they seem ghostly to me just because, no one's exactly sure about the reality of them. So people don't really want to engage in these topics for the most part, like your neighbors and your family. I mean, they will, but there's a feeling of risk associated with these topics. And I called it in Black Swan Ghosts, I called it what sociologists have called it, which is a social danger zone, which is that something, you get involved with could tarnish your reputation um, in a irreversible way. Uh, you know, as happens to politicians sometimes that get caught doing the wrong sorts of things. And there's that sort of fear built into these topics too. And it's not just that society is suspicious of them. I mean, witches were burned at the stake in Europe and drowned in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, whatever you define a witch to be. I guess I would be in that category, having been involved with remote viewing. I'd be a warlock now. So that we have this inherent fear. A lot of people believe we have this inherent fear from centuries of persecution for anyone that displayed psychic ability and so forth. But it's not just that, Dana. we've had government disinformation programs since Roswell. Even before that, there were a couple incidents, Italy, Cape Girardeau, and others, Mississippi, where it looked like there were some pretty severe national security restrictions built in around containing this topic since the 40s or 50s. So we've been subject to our own government's disinformation campaigns about this, which cause people more to laugh at it and not really take it seriously. And that really seemed to be the purpose. And I'm not saying that's completely wrong because it seemed that our government felt this could cause some sort of panic or opening for the Soviet Union to create confusion with, unknown, unidentified aerial phenomena, as it's called now. So we had these programs under the guise of national security to prevent sort of mass panic by making fun of these topics or giving these hokey explanations, like what people are seeing or, swamp
Right.
gas and weather balloons. So we're in a very strange situation right now, in our society at this time, because if you talk to people and if you give lectures like I do, I just gave a Bigfoot lecture uh, just a couple days ago in a place called Troy in Idaho. And you can see it on my YouTube channel. Just search for my name, Simeon Hein, or Fractal Friend is the name of the channel, one word, Fractal Friend. You can see how engaged that audience is in the topic. And I often find when I give these lectures, Dana, so many people in the audience, I'm not like many, but like more than you would expect, have had experiences with Bigfoot, with UFOs, with missing time, with orbs. At this last presentation I gave, you can see it right on the YouTube channel. It's Bigfoot fractals and paranormal hidden events. There's a woman who raises her hand and says, I was followed by an orb coming up the highway recently. And it was so scary. I didn't even talk about it to my family for 3 months. Didn't even talk about it to my family for 3 months. So I find that a lot of people have had this experience. The Air Force study of ball lightning in the 1970s, J. Reese Roth concluded that 1 out of 20 people had seen ball lightning. And that is considered to be really rare, but 1 out of 20 is not super rare. That's 5% of the population. So, and that's just ball lightning. And there's all these permutations of ball lightning because they're seen around Sasquatch. I mean, I had my artists on dark matter monsters, and he created this like orb around the Bigfoot, which is what people sometimes see around them. And we don't know where do orbs begin and ball lightning ends. Ball lightning is a real atmospheric phenomena,
Hmm.
but it can show up in clear skies with no storms. I've talked to people who've experienced that. And then you have these orbs around these portal areas, Skinwalker Ranch, Elbert County, south of you. That's northeast of Colorado Springs, the Rocky Mountain Ranch. Katie Page lived there for a couple of years, and she's talked about her experiences. Just same thing as Skinwalker Ranch. Got Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona. I
Hmm.
was fortunate to be in that recent movie about the Bradshaw Ranch. Ron Meyer put that one together. And you have these other places, but Marley Woods in southern Missouri, uh, uh, Ted Phillips, who passed on not too long ago, was kind of protege of J. Allen Hynek, the UFO researcher for the Air Force, who kind of turned against the Air Force eventually. Yeah, uh, he talked about the same sort of phenomena you get in southern Missouri at this place. There, strange creatures, UFOs, orbs, sudden temperature changes, missing time. It's the same thing in all these places. So I think what we can say is that these experiences that you're interested in, we talked a couple months ago about this. In fact, you and I talked, it was December. I remember I was driving at the time
It's
through,
been a while. Yeah.
yeah, I think I was in
Yeah.
Kansas or Missouri driving at the time when you called. And we agreed, to talk another time like we're doing now. I think so Dana, I think these experiences are more common than you would think because when I talk to witnesses, I can sometimes get them to talk, but the other person that was there will say, it's so uniform. I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to think of I just want to forget about it because it's so strange.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the only conclusion we can reasonably come to, given that the Air Force said that ball lightning's more common than we thought, but we don't hear a lot of people talking about it. But 1 out of 20 Americans, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That would be millions and millions of people who experience this. I would say it's probably the same for UFO sightings, Bigfoot, ghost sightings, and these sort of time slips, which I'm sure you've heard about, where people go
I've had them.
somewhere, you had them and eat at a
Yeah.
restaurant that closed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Things
That I
like
haven't
that.
had, but yeah,
Missing time. Have you
missing
had
time
missing?
is mine. Yeah. Missing
Yeah,
time is mainly what I've had.
right, right. I've had a friend who had that in a Bigfoot area up by Estes Park. They didn't even know, they walked into the national park to take a hike, and all of a sudden they're back in the parking lot, like half hour later. They don't remember how they got back there. They just remember going through the forest. All of a sudden they're both back and it's dark. Like, yeah. So you've experienced something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I've driven about 30 miles from the Thornton there to Stapleton Airport, the old airport.
Yeah.
Um, Drove there and I was taking the back roads where it was multiple turns and it was like 30 miles. And I don't remember, um, I remember locking the house door and that's it. I don't remember turning around, going to the car, getting in the car, driving all that way, um, parking the car at work, walking in and our meeting. And then next thing I know, I'm standing talking with the guys at work.
Wow. Was the
Yeah.
time appropriate for how long it would have taken, or was there something off about that?
You know, I don't even know. I mean, the people at work never said anything to me or anything weird. I left the same time as normal. Um, I don't remember anything during that time. I didn't
So
even think to look at the clock or anything like that because I wasn't into this
any
then.
other symptoms that would indicate something happened? Anything strange in the car? Any objects? Anything out of place?
Not that I can recall. I didn't even, again, I wasn't into this kind of stuff back then. And
No.
I thought I was just sleeping at the wheel because I
Right,
was
right. I
working a
mean,
night
that's a
shift.
long
So
time to fall asleep. I mean,
yeah,
I've had brief moments of going to sleep for 2 or 3 seconds, and that was scary enough.
yeah, I had several of these missing times and
That's a lot
waking
of
up
time. I
and
only lost a few seconds, and it's because my eyes closed and the sun was coming in, and I learned to take naps more often. It happens once when you're young and you're not aware of it, and you realize, whoa, I got to pay attention to that sleepy feeling. When you're younger, you don't know these things because you're learning to drive, and you don't, I can deal
yeah,
with it, and all of a sudden you're falling. But that's really so
yeah.
that type of missing time. So here's the thing, Dana. I've heard missing time experiences from people I know and people who've talked at conferences where they got to the place way too quick. It doesn't make sense. In fact, I've heard three,
Hmm.
two at conferences, one person I know. And in all cases, they were far too far along for the clock. It didn't make sense how far they had gotten. They just lost time, but the clock didn't, it wasn't, it was too quick where they got to. It should have taken longer, should have used more gas. All of a sudden they just find themselves really far away and not enough time is it's not like they could have fallen asleep because like Jonathan Dover, the Navajo Ranger law enforcement guy from Navajo Reservation told this story that he was going to work one day and he would always leave at the same time and wanted to get to the gas station before there was a line, and he would time it just
Right.
exactly so. And McDonald's, he wanted to get
Yeah.
McDonald's before there was a line. Yes, he'd
Yeah.
leave early, and one time he got there and it was just way too early. It just didn't make sense. Nothing was even open yet. And he just missed something happened on the road. All of a sudden he's like 30 miles down the road in 10 minutes. It's not possible. And other people I've heard tell these stories where they all of a sudden their car was in a cornfield, and when they're with other people, they don't even know where they are, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't. Yeah, so you have these kind of dislocation events, time slips. I mean, the really strange ones, Dana, are the ones a friend of mine was water skiing on Lake, is it Lake Havasu, I think? Well, one of the lakes in Utah area that borders other states. And um, they came back and went into this bar. This is her story, and I've heard her tell it a number of times. She's with her boyfriend and the boyfriend's two twin brothers, twins. And they go
Mhm.
in, and the guy bartender's really nice to them. Playing the whole album of Styx, The Grand Illusion. People come in, they're having a good time, and they, um, they remember starting to go back to. They're saying, "No, it's kind of weird here." But they go back to their rooms, and then the next thing they know, they wake up in the wrong beds. And
Yeah.
so they go down and have breakfast in the hotel, and they ask the waitress, "Well, what's that weird bar there?" And she says, It's not there anymore. It closed." And they said, "No, it wasn't. We were just there last night." She goes, "You couldn't have been there last night. It was closed 20 years ago." So they run out. It's a little town, on
Right.
Lake Mead or somewhere like this, and it's all chained up and dusty. It's not open. Hasn't been open. And they all four experienced the exact same thing. They all had the same memories. It's not like a hallucination. It's not like
Hmm.
someone was drugged or something. They all have identical memories. And I've heard this a number of times where things that seem to exist disappear. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and here's the thing that interests me, Dana, since I have a science background. I taught
Sure.
statistics. I taught research methods. I don't like just to let things go and say it's just magic, it's supernatural, it's paranormal. Okay, let's get on with our lives. No, I come from a background of scholars and PhDs, and you know, my particular background is of people that are very educated and so forth. And I got PhD myself, and so um, I think it's having this like Germanic background, educated Germanic Jewish background. So I'm always interested in this, and that's why I put together this book, Dark Matter Monsters, because when I started looking into, and it started by going, I hear my students tell me about their Bigfoot encounters. Uh, I began to see the same phenomena popping up every time, especially listening to all these podcasts that we have available to us now, online. YouTube shows and podcasts, and we can hear people telling their stories. It's not just a story being read. You can hear the person's voice. You can hear the fear, the panic, the sense of not knowing what's going on. You often get the same symptoms. And when I stopped by the Bailey Sasquatch Outpost, down the road from you in Bailey, Colorado, to Route 285, and I saw that, I was just going by with a friend one day, and some people had mentioned this place to me, and I thought, Sasquatch Museum. What's that about? So we were going by there one day, and I just saw this. She said, "Hey, it's the Sasquatch outpost." It was like this huge Sasquatch on the side of a building. We stopped in, and there was a map, and it showed how frequent these encounters were around the Front Range, all the way up to your area, all the way up to Fort Collins.
Mhm.
Of There was a colored dot. I the Jim Myers, who's the runs this place, let me take put a picture of the map in the book. So there's the
There you
Sasquatch
go.
outpost, and there's the map, and you see all these little dots, colored pins. One was for footprints, one was for howling sounds, another was for tree structures, and now they've added another one for getting rocks thrown at you.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
I've
happened.
had sounds in my front yard. I don't know. I still don't know what it is, but it wasn't a dog. It wasn't anything that I know of. But I was sitting on my front porch one time, and it was just at dusk, which I think is when they come out typically, right? Around dusk, just before dark. And I was hearing a sound of just up and down, like whoop, whoop, and it's like that. So I knew it wasn't like a dog or anything. And I'm like, okay, I think I better head inside. just in case. But yeah, I heard that in
Are
my
you
front yard.
closer up? Are you more on towards the Front Range or more towards I-25?
I am probably front range. Yeah, I'm front
Yeah,
range.
so this is where people have experienced them a lot. And you read these stories from Fort Collins area down through Ward and Boulder area. I've had friends in Boulder who've seen things walk through their yard at night that they can't identify. They're bipedal and they're not sure what they're looking at. So, Dana, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. I wasn't there. They do come out and they walk through yards, and people just don't even know what they're seeing. So, a friend of mine experienced one in the Black Forest area north of Colorado Springs, and her experience was going to sleep upstairs, kind of just dozing off, and then seeing an image of a orange-haired Sasquatch in her mind's eye and hearing the howl.
Hmm.
And it was downstairs on the porch because her friend saw it through the kitchen doors. And it was exactly what she saw in her mind's eye. Like it projected the image into her mind, which is really interesting. And so another friend of mine was pulled out of his sleeping bag up by Netherland, his sleeping bag. He was camping, high school, grew up in your area, and uh, something unzips the tent in a completely empty campground and not just pulls him out. I mean, like we're talking jet speeds, like gravitational compression, so fast.
Wow.
He said he couldn't get out of the bag. It was such he was like the G forces were pushing him into the foot of the bag, and he's 6'4". He's huge.
Wow.
And when he popped his head out when it dropped him, he yelled and it dropped him. There wasn't anything there. People, nothing. So so that's the sort of thing, I've experienced people telling me about. But when I saw the encounters at the Sasquatch outpost, you could see it was a hidden event because it's more people are experiencing it. Uh, Up from where I live in Chautauqua Park, there's this report on the BFRO site, Bigfoot Reporting Research Organization, which yeah, I'm not sure if it's been updated in a while, but at least not in the areas I looked at. Matt Moneymaker, a Bigfoot researcher, started it, and people could post, and the BFR sends out people to talk to you if you've seen something, and they call you or they talk to you. And there was this case right in Chautauqua. It's a very popular city park right at the edge of the Front Range. And this guy saw something stand up in the ditch at 6, 7 at night. He'd go up there. He was a biology student just to relax. Huge stand up and walk away on two legs back into the woods, big and hairy, between him and the parking lot. But he said he didn't talk about it for 10 years because, going to grad school, you get this response from people,
Right.
I have a
Right.
good job, So what it shows us, I think, Dana, is there's enough consistency. And, let me tell you what the consistencies are. You get this sudden cold that people experience, ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, same
Hmm.
thing. Sudden silence, like the area goes quiet. Even around ball lightning, this happens. You get some of
Oh,
these
wow.
time slips, you get electromagnetic anomalies, people's cars stalling as they approach these creatures, not just Bigfoot, any sort of cryptid that happens to be out there. Batteries stop working, things go on the fritz, um, and phenomena like that in all of these types of cases. So my bent, I'm just going back to what I said a few minutes ago, my
Sure.
bent is to look at that is scientific reproducibility there because that's what we're looking for in science that differentiates science from just belief is some repeatable sort of data that we can find patterns in. I mean, to me, that's what science is all about. And you see some sort of pattern that suggests some sort of order to what you're looking at instead of it just being mystical, just like when electromagnetism was discovered in the 1800s. And there was a huge amount of skepticism and hostility towards Faraday and Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell, because the people just didn't believe there these mysterious electromagnetic fields. But Maxwell predicted radio waves he made a prediction. He said, if my theory is true, there should be these invisible waves that go between objects and they should be detectable at a distance. And they were discovered by David Hughes in the US, but people discouraged him. We never heard about him, but you read books, Electromagnetism, an American discovered radio, and people said, oh, it's probably just, magnetic induction, like one of those induction heaters that we can have in a kitchen, just electromagnetic
Yeah.
propagation from magnetic field. And then Hertz is the one who technically is given the credit for discovering Heinrich Hertz, the German physicist, 10 years later or something like that. But nobody really knew at the time what these were, but you have this sort of reproducibility, and Hertz, I mean, Maxwell makes a prediction using mathematics, which is pretty impressive. I mean, think about it. You're sort of seeing these patterns. You have the person tinkered with it, didn't have a lot of educational background, but
Mhm.
was interested in motors. Michael Faraday, right? He originally was like a bookbinder, but he got interested in motors. It's really cool. And then you have someone later work out the math of these sort of 90-degree pointing vectors for electrical and magnetic fields. This sort of type of electromagnetism we're familiar with. And there's a lot of hostility towards it, but it predicts radio waves. Well, around these phenomena that people like you and me are interested in, there are similar phenomena coming up again and again, the sudden cold, the silence, which indicates some sort of really fundamental alteration in the electromagnetic field. That's one way to look at it, that it's interfering with the propagation of electromagnetic and sound waves. Something's changing in the space. And
Yeah.
um, so there is some science behind even these time slips. Um, and I've heard of, recent cases where right before the time slip, people experience this sudden cold. So, Dana, you don't have to agree with me. In fact, no one listening has to agree with me, but I think there are these physical correlates of these space-time anomalies. Maybe they're not anomalies, but just let me say one more thing that we know recently from all the research done in condensed matter physics, now called low energy nuclear reaction. 20, 30 years ago, it's called cold fusion. Stanley and Pons at University of Utah, with their cold fusion announcement in 89. That is based on alternate electromagnetic arrangements that are based on fractal geometry that are inward facing loops and toroidal shapes rather than this kind of outward facing electromagnetism of Maxwell, these open systems where they just propagate outward. There's another type of system where they propagate inward, according to some research from the former Soviet Union, and then Russia in the 90s, all the way down to what we call the 0 point field, that this fractal arrangement of loops, rings within rings, all electromagnetic, alternating electric, magnetic and electrical, goes inward and interacts with, different types of neutrinos, possibly dark matter, 0 point energy field, and creates this ball lightning effect from this research. So it seems to me, I know I'm talking a lot here, but I'll just
No, you're
sum.
fine.
Yeah, there is another reality we're next to based on alternate electromagnetic fields, and we call it the paranormal. I'm not saying this is the be all and end all. I'm not trying to explain all this away. I'm just trying to explain some of it. And it's
Right.
next to us. You might not see it, but it's there. And maybe it's not really active, but it shows up, and there are life forms that live on this plane of fractal electromagnetic fields. And we call them ghosts. We call them Bigfoot. Even some ETs seem to navigate this space. Bill Tiller, he's passed away now, but I got to see him speak a number of times. He was this engineer who was interested in these sort of phenomena. He called them conditioned spaces. And he was interested in this sort of resonance effect. He called it reciprocal space. Like there's a direct space, like we're all used to, which we're taught about in school. There's a reciprocal energetic space, and things happen in that space. And where they happen a lot, Dana, we call them portals.
Yeah.
But they happen in certain houses for some reason. They seem to, you know, be involved in haunted places, and they seem to be involved in Bigfoot for some reason, even though
Mm.
it seems to be flesh and blood and physical. People in your area, if you talk to them, would have seen these creatures trundling around in the Front Range. I know people have seen them right there in the Front Range, not too far away from you, just up 34 towards Estes Park.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I've talked to them. They said, this is where you got to go. You want to see them? So, I'm reading one of these books
Okay.
by Rusty Wilson, who's this Steamboat Springs based fly fisherman. He writes all these books based on what people tell him after, when they're hanging around after the fishing that night. He makes dinner for them and they tell stories and he collects these stories. There was another story right there, just south of Estes Park, of people. And this is the strangest thing. I'll just tell this really quickly. So it's so
Sure.
interesting. So these people are camping along a creek 5 miles south of Estes Park. Forget the name of that river creek that comes out of there down from Estes Park, and they hear what sounds like a human mimicking an air raid siren. Some living thing mimicking an air raid siren, and it's coming towards them. And it keeps coming
Mm.
and goes, ooh, what
Yeah.
the heck is this? It comes right up to the tent and they start running. They run into the car. They're leaving in the truck and the thing blocks the truck. Or it lifts it up. They can't go anywhere. Something like that. Forget the exact story. It tilts the truck, or they run out of their vehicle along the road, and it blocks them from going any farther down the road. So the only way is to go up the hillsides there. It's pretty steep up there.
Yeah.
They run up the hillside, and just as they're running up, they see the creature running past them, and it keeps going, and then they hear this
Hmm.
roar, and it's a flash flood. And it was this flash flood in the 80s that killed a lot of people. A number of
Oh,
people.
wow.
Yeah, you can look it up. I did some research on this flash flood, and
Yeah.
I think it was in the 80s. And so this thing saved their lives. It even knew to make like the air siren sound, and it all made sense later. It wouldn't let them drive because they would have gotten caught driving along.
Yeah.
It made them go up. It was like saved their lives. Like it knew what it was doing. So like these are real creatures
Wow.
that have normal sensibilities, but there are a range of phenomena around them sometimes that are pretty strange. They seem to glow. They seem to affect car batteries. They affect people's devices. They can cause this sense of time loss. They can even cause apparently objects to like temporarily levitate when, they're around and things like
Really?
that.
I haven't heard that one yet, but yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so they're kind of like in both worlds. It's very hard for our
Mm.
minds to understand this, but this is my feeling about it is they are in our world as some sort of relic human, paranormal human, whatever you want to call them. I mean, I think they're more in the human camp than the ape camp, but we don't know for sure. But I mean, I've spoken to people at
Mhm.
conferences, Native Americans whose grandparents traded with Bigfoot. I've spoken to two whose grandparents traded with Bigfoot, so they're understand basic economics, and but they have this other supernatural side, and it's there because people say they don't walk away, they just turn and they're gone. They just like disappear. Other people I've spoken to said pixelate. They pixelate and turn into this predator type shimmering image that Paul Hynek, J. Allen Hynek's son, developed for the film industry when he worked in special effects. And we're on that Predator movie and kind of created the Predator effect. That's what the Bigfoot seemed to look like. And people say the air feels charged, statically charged around where the Bigfoot was if you like run up to where they were standing. So there is this other side to it. It has a dual nature, which is, what was always argued about quantum mechanics 100 years ago. It's like both physical, like we're used to, and there's like a reciprocal component that is wave-like,
Mm.
dual nature. So that is, why these, to me, you get a lot of commonalities in these experiences, which I think is important for us to understand because it could indicate new ways of generating energy, the way we live on the planet, like some resource that we're not tapping into that makes sense, and we should be tapping into it. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nature's already doing it, right?
Yeah. Amazing. I didn't think of that side of it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I
We
think
can work
Nikola
together.
Tesla
Yeah.
realized it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why this matters. I mean, these subjects are fascinating in and of themselves, but they matter to us because it matters how we use energy. And if there are better ways that we could be surviving on the planet with lower costs, using nature's energy like Nikola Tesla and other researchers have told us is possible, instead of this metered system that we're currently on right now. And that is really the big take home prize here, is to figure this out and not keep it locked up in these special access programs. That is what's been holding us back, is these programs. They classify this stuff away. The people who have access to this don't talk about it. Maybe there's good reason not to talk about it, defense implications, weapons, things like this. I
Right.
understand that, but we need to make progress too as a society, as a planet. If we have less polluting energy sources, I mean, we all agree that's it's just no brainer. So that's, to me, Dana, that's what a lot of this comes down to. I'm not saying this is everything. I'm just saying this is one
Right.
way to look at these, because we have these common phenomena so often.
Yeah.
So just one story. You wanted stories. We talked about this when we talked that time a couple months ago. I did have an experience with my mom in the Everglades.
Go for it.
She was a bird watcher, and she took us out there, just me and her, not my brother or dad. And we were out there with our binoculars in this really remote swampy area, and we were looking at birds, and this huge object showed up right overhead that was as big as a full moon. That's what I thought it was initially, but it was green, and it
Mm.
was amorphous. And my mom knew the moon was there. She pointed to it on the
Right.
horizon, but this was overhead, but it looked like a moon. And it was just big and round and hovering there, but it was cloud-like. But when we put our binoculars on it, there was pattern and structure inside the amorphous
Oh, wow.
cloud. And then it just picked up from totally still to fast, and it went into a cloud. I mean, just picked up. I mean, it's the strangest thing I ever saw in my life. It looked amorphous, like it almost could be exhaust from a rocket, but perfectly circular. I mean, I wasn't sure how such a thing could happen. We weren't that far from Cape Canaveral, but there wasn't any launches going on that we were aware of. You didn't hear anything. It was, all of a sudden, it was there. It was green. Thinking, what could that be? It looks kind of
Yeah.
like a giant cloud. But then it went from no movement to like going the other direction of the wind back into a cloud. So it was strange. And that was my experience. Since you're probably wondering, how did I get, what happened? That's what happened to me as a kid, 12-year-old, that I think opened my mind, especially Dana, since the park ranger didn't want to talk about it when we went to the
Mm.
fireside chat. She
Well,
would
yeah.
not have it.
That makes you curious. It's like, why aren't they talking about it? And what was that? As a 12-year-old male, I mean, I would think your mind was just going crazy of, I got to find out, got to find out, got to find out. A little less than a female. A
Yeah, I
female
thought
will
maybe
probably
she'd
say,
tell
okay.
us.
Wow.
Yeah, she just
That's
said,
something.
there was the power went out, everything, it's like, and she was just rationalizing it all the way. And she wouldn't even talk to my mom afterwards. My mom went up to her and she was like, that's how we've been brought up, is not to rock the boat. But then again, what did we see?
Right.
What's up there that goes from nothing to really fast, quick, and has
Right.
structured dots in a line inside when you see it in binoculars?
So
Clear
you were seeing the
structure.
inside. So you think you were seeing the inside of the UA, U was it UAF or whatever now?
Yeah, whatever they
Like,
want to call it.
yeah,
I don't know if we were seeing this. We were seeing something, it was
yeah,
just very hard to make out what we were seeing. Cloud-like, but structure-like, both at the same time.
right,
Maybe it
right.
was like a plasma field. I could believe that. Maybe it was an energy field. It's hard to say.
Hard to
But
say.
I
Yeah,
saw it and it was real. And since everyone has something that they can remember that got them interested in these subjects, and that could be what it is. It's not because I'll tell you, Dana, I did not pursue that type of topic through college or grad school. I mean, never. I don't remember a single conference. I remember
yeah.
Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret from '87. I think I read one book on UFOs. Somehow it showed up. It wasn't a preoccupation. I was pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
focused on, like a lot of people, on your career, and you're getting your degree, and you're focused on your topics. And it didn't have anything to do with any of this stuff. But,
Right.
um, these questions persist in your mind, and societies change over time, and things that we didn't talk about before come to the
Yeah.
forefront. So that's how I got involved with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these topics, and this is why I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas to go in, like I'm kind of like you. I don't recall having any real interest. I did have experiences as a 6-year-old, but I don't remember having any thought process of wanting to know anything about this. And I get in college and we have to write a paper. And here I am out of the blue. Looking back, I don't know why I even thought of it, but I wrote a paper on poltergeist. It's like, why? It scared the crap out of me. It took me forever to write it because I had to stop every 10 minutes because I was freaking myself out, like, but here I am. Look at me now. So something was nudging me.
Yeah, I think, as younger kids, we kind of are a little more open to these things. Kids see these things more often.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
You read
pretty
these stories
interesting.
about kids talking about this. They're seeing the same things with their siblings that their
Yeah.
parents couldn't see. These so-called imaginary playmates, but the parents can hear like balls bouncing around and stuff. It's strange.
Yeah. 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 Or
And
even
but
talking about, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, just like your experience. I mean, you have this curiosity.
Yeah. And it's just kind of weird, but you hear little kids and everything talking about their past lives and all too. And that is kind of a whole interesting topic in itself.
It
Do
is,
you
and
have, yeah.
we've had this podcast, the telepathy tapes, which is about telepathic kids, autistic kids that have these special abilities and so forth. Um, I did have one more area though that really contributed to it, which was crop circles. That's my first book was about that. And I going from remote viewing to crop circles, I mean, it's a whole nother subject we can talk about another time. But
Mhm.
I just it was a target. It was a remote viewing target. I thought, okay, I've got to get feedback, go over to the UK, see what these are. And I kept going back year after year. I went with a guy named Ron Russell from the Denver area, and he gave these tours. And eventually, he turned the tours over to me after 10 years or so, and I started giving the tours. I was there 20 times, and we saw so much battery and camera failure around these crop circles. Even the man-made ones that we could determine were man-made would have these effects. We would make some ourselves eventually, pay the farmer, put up a sign, this is a man-made project, science project, and we'd still get some of these effects of weird camera and battery discharges, like a lot of static there that's not in the field ordinarily, but when it's in a pattern, it somehow condenses the static charge. So
Um,
I was kind of familiar with these weird electromagnetic effects. And it was, it was a kind of a shock to find out that this was happening around Bigfoot. I mean, you could understand why you'd get cars stopping around UFOs because they have so much energy. I mean, it doesn't explain it directly, but I mean,
Right.
UFOs are advanced technology. Maybe they're interfering with the electromagnetics of the engine, But Bigfoot, I mean, the first witnesses I talked to were from Colorado and had cameras stop working around Bigfoot. I mean, the whole
Wow.
battery's drained. They had to recharge them later. Um, so, uh, so it's still the same sort of thing because you have these coherent patterns. You have this sort of anomalous energy flow, and so I don't know. I'm kind of encouraged now. We have a lot more shows about this, and people are talking about it, and people are willing to contact you online. And
Yeah, I'm open for any kind of stories. Like I say, I have lots of stories myself, and
do
I like to tell them, and I know other people need to tell them,
you want to
just to
share
give them
any
off.
before we? Do you want to share any stories?
Oh, how about my recent one? My
Go
most
ahead.
recent. A few weeks ago, I'm driving to work, and this all happened in like it's a 10 to 15 second period. I'm carpooling. I'm the driver, and we're going, and I suddenly start feeling like I have to really focus on what I'm saying to my passenger. And then I felt like I was knocked into my body, like I was just jarred back into my body. And I opened my eyes, and it was like, oh crap, here's the stop sign. I got to stop. I was like, wow, that came up fast, is what I said to her. And we got to talking about it later. And she's like, you started talking in very slow motion. I thought you were just playing, just messing around. Because she's like, you started talking really slow motion. And she goes, you weren't dodging things in the street that you normally do. Um, you were really going faster than you typically drive. I mean, it wasn't you driving. And she says, I completely zoned out. She says, you were just zoned. And then later that morning, we're talking during break, and somebody else, and we were talking to a point where nobody really knew exactly what we were talking about. But another person started talking about seeing lights in the sky that morning. So, kind of putting the two and two together and thinking they did some downloads on me or DNA work or something. And funny thing is, since then, I haven't had a dream. I haven't had a dream since then. And prior to that, I was having like two, three a night.
Mhm.
And I'm just now starting to get visions to pop in here and there. But
Wow.
yeah, and that was about 2, 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's my newest one.
I see. Weird. That's
Yeah.
kind of weird.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's around about the same area because up in Fort Collins, over one of the main streets there, couple of years back, I saw lights going by, which was like a flash of lights up in the sky and white lights. And they were fairly decent size, and they were like, boom, boom, boom.
hmm,
And I thought, well, maybe it's the airport. I'm like, no, the airport's light goes the opposite direction.
right,
And
right.
it wouldn't flash like this.
Mhm.
That would just kind of do one of these.
Right.
So yeah, it was like, not sure.
Okay, so those are good. Good. So you're reminding me of one of my students, Mary, from 1997 in Boulder, when I first started teaching RV in Boulder. Uh, she had uh, she had a target. We gave her a target to view. It was that Woody Allen sleeper house on I-70 up in the hills there.
Oh, okay. The roundhouse
Yeah,
is
coming
what we call
and
it.
going.
Yeah.
west there on out of the
Hmm.
Denver area, go up, to Eisenhower Pass. It's way before there. It's by those little towns as you're kind of coming out of the Red Rocks area, and you're going up at I-70 and so forth. Yeah, Morristown. Yeah,
Yeah, there you
Golden,
go. It's been a
Golden.
while.
What's that?
It's been a while since I've been that
Yeah,
direction.
Golden Morrison. So she, she does this target, and she breaks into tears. She doesn't even know what the target is consciously. We haven't shown her the picture yet. It just reminds her of something. And then she said, we show her the round house, and it reminded her of a flying saucer, and she had
Hmm.
memories come back of things hovering over the house as a kid that she had
Oh, wow.
forgotten, and hovering, coming down on the house, and sounds and things. And it triggered this sort of panic. Well, in any case, a couple weeks later, no, just about a week later, she says she's up in Estes Park, where she lives at the time. And she says in the intersection right in Estes Park, I wonder which the intersection was. She said there was a green luminous object the size of a VW bug hovering in the air. And it was
Huh.
there for about 30 seconds because she had a clock and she was timing it. And then it shot off. And she
Hmm.
felt that doing the viewing session opened her to some other realm of reality. And then she sees this, UFO. And then she feels all better about what happened to her as a kid. It's not really scary anymore. It's like it opened up the door.
Yeah.
So, that is the sort of thing, like one thing leads to the next. Um, the author, researcher, Stan Gordon from Pennsylvania wrote a book, Silent Invasion, about Bigfoot UFO uh, co-happenings at the same time, Bigfoot
Hmm.
UFO sightings in roughly the same area around the same time periods,
Yeah.
70s, that wave in the 70s that swept across the US. So these things seem to be connected sort of tangentially. We don't totally understand it, but I mean, it makes you think of a little bit of parallel realities, multiverses, Hugh Everett the third. I mean, I'm open to other explanations, but it suggests other types of reality that were around that we don't remember because it's just so strange. You can forget things in minutes. People who've encountered these Bigfoot and cryptids, I mean, there are cases of people forgetting in 10 minutes what happened. Just because,
Wow.
like we were saying earlier, it's like they don't even want to think about it, you know?
I can see that side of it is it's like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to believe in it. So
You told me a
you
story about
force
that
it
at the
out.
beginning of the show here tonight, wasn't there? Where you talked to someone and they said they didn't want to think about it again or something.
No,
Maybe it was my
not
story,
that
but
I'm not that I'm thinking of. Maybe
no.
I forgot. That would have surprised me.
If you watch the movie A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and then there's the paranormal version of it here. Um, Paranormal Bigfoot, but the first one was called Bigfoot Revealed. It's on all the streaming channels. They have these psychiatric professionals say that the brain's defense mechanisms, like it causes people to forget things they've encountered. And it could be causing us to forget experiences of this other reality that seems to me to be next to us, like a mirror Earth, a mirror Earth. I mean, a New Scientist has had articles about this possibility of a mirror Earth that has, like just kind of an alternate set of particles, like an antimatter world, um, and with different rules and different creatures that live there and different physical constants, mirror neutrons and things like this. Um, it seems to create this idea of a mirror reality sort of solve some problems in physics. Uh, about how neutrons behave and so forth. So maybe that's
Interesting.
what's going on, but our defense
Yeah.
mechanisms, just like that book Flatland from the 1880s by Edwin Abbott, I kind of opened when I wrote Opening Minds, I kind of talked about Edwin Abbott, because it's a
Hmm.
parody of Victorian England, but it's a book where there's a three-dimensional reality, but the people in the book live on a table surface, so they don't know about three dimensions, and the authorities don't want them to know about three dimensions. So that's sort of like what we're in, is this flat land, and
Hmm.
it's just there's more there, and we have people who've attempted to study this. We had the OSAP program in the Department of Defense turned into ATIP. We've heard about this UFO program. These were UFO programs that ended up studying these phenomena, orbs and cryptids and things, because it goes along with the territory. So it's fascinating stuff, and that's what I can tell you about for today. So
Yeah, that's all interesting. That's all. And I know you have lots more stories to tell. And
sure, we can
yeah,
talk about them another time. So
yeah, I'd love to have you back on.
sure.
I'd love
Well,
to.
thanks for having me, Dana. I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's always a blast for me. I always so much enjoy everyone's stories and experiences and what they can bring to help others out to know that they're not crazy too. So I love it. I love it. So,
Thanks. My website is newcrystalmind.com, my blog. You
and
can
we'll put
find
it down below too,
Yeah,
so everyone can find it.
newcrystalmind.com. It has my all links to all my books, my remote viewing classes, and I have a YouTube channel, as I mentioned, where
Mhm.
I just create ideas about this and I kind of put little presentations together, and I have recordings of my presentations to the public. So, so thanks everyone for watching today.
Oh, and we thank you for being on the show. It's been a great pleasure having you here. Really, it's been awesome.
Thank you.
So, if there's anybody else out there that has any experiences you would love to share and let us know how it goes, email me lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And we will talk with everybody later. Thanks. Bye.